Hello, good evening, and welcome to Response to COVID-19. I'm Wesley Gibbings, and this is TTT Live. And we are joined by Talk City 91.1 FM and TTT Live online. There are now 9 confirmed cases of COVID-19 in Trinidad and Tobago. And as government implements measures to stymie the spread of the virus, the impact is being felt all around. One major sector that is being hit hard is the hospitality sector, tourism, with hotel occupancy on the decline and restaurants being closed to walk-in customers. On set with me this evening is Group CEO of the Trinidad Hotels, Restaurants and Tourism Association of Trinidad and Tobago and the Trinidad and Tobago Hospitality Institute, Brian Frontin.
Good evening, sir.
Welcome, Brian. Joining us on Skype will be President of the Trinidad Hotel and Tourism, the Tobago Hotel and Tourism Association, Chris James, and on the phone, Chief Executive Officer of the Tobago Tourism Agency, Louis Lewis. Mr. Frontin, where in the business recovery manuals that teach you about how to conduct business, is there a scenario like this?
I think the chapter is being written as we speak. This is unprecedented disruption, displacement, and erosion of any forecast or any sort of business continuity plan that could have been developed even as far back as 20 or 30 years ago. The simple reality is there's never been a convergence of a crisis that has affected all travel activity, global travel activity. And I would say overnight in real terms, over the space of maybe 60 days, there was a complete collapse of travel. And I think it's going to get a bit worse before we come out of this particular cycle.
Now, how much of a prep was the 2007-2008 financial collapse, if it was at all?
Well, every market had its own exposure, and of course it would be based on where your investment portfolio was held, what your economic situation as a country was at the time, and therefore you'd find countries like Canada, for instance, weathered that downturn pretty well. They weren't as exposed in terms of risk and investments. And the Caribbean as well felt more knock-on impacts of the US market. So not even that actually has been flagged as the real market. The market for travel and tourism was the 9/11 terror attacks. This week alone, there's been reports from Tourism Economics that this COVID fallout is going to be 6 times more detrimental than the 9/11 terror attack, just to put it in context. There's never been a time when travel from and to major source markets globally has halted at the same time.
Okay, now, the government has taken measures, which it has explained,
Yes.
is for the protection of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. And they have appeared to be fairly extreme, but this country has been looked at very favorably with respect to it being a response to the pandemic. What are the immediate effects felt by the members of your organization?
It's been quite a roller coaster week for us. We started off with, of course, indications last Friday that there would be a limited school arrangements in terms of the closure of schools. Sunday morning, there was more guidance from the Ministry of Labor in respect of treating with workers who may be unable or may have challenges with taking care of their young children who are out of school, and to be flexible as employers. And that was a move that was, again, considered as something possible and something that could be embraced quickly. Monday changed things a bit more in terms of the travel restrictions that were announced, that all incoming non-national travel would be curtailed on Tuesday evening, as well as the closure of bars, and got more specific, restaurants, and got further specific in terms of dining in restaurants and congregation and mass gatherings. Social distancing, of course, being one of the preferred methods to curb the contagion and the spread, however, had that quick knock-on effect. This afternoon, I've gotten this information of an updated public health ordinance that extends the horizon from a 14-day window in the first instance to a July 2020 period in which bars, restaurants, hotels have bars and restaurants as well, effectively cannot operate and will be in contravention of the laws of Trinidad and Tobago. That is almost a debilitating impact, a necessary measure. I think they required a little more consultation about what the next reactions from the business sector are going to be in hospitality and tourism. Some of these signals are along the lines of immediate layoffs and immediate closures because there's no end in sight by way of revenue and income. You have incoming arrivals being decimated. Most hotels are projecting 100% non-occupancy next week, or 0% occupancy, I should say, and restaurants have zero income.
Okay, while we're on that topic, let's switch to Tobago now. Chris James, are you on the line?
Yes, I am. Good evening, everybody.
Yes, good evening. What do things look like now? Things weren't looking too well over the past, in recent years. Now we've had these measures that Brian has been speaking about. What does the outlook sound like now?
Concur with Brian completely. I mean, first of all, yes, the last 10 years have not been good. We've lost international arrivals, and then we had, of course, the problem with the sea bridge. So we've only been averaging around 30% occupancy anyway. As of next week, we will be zero. Once the British Airways flight and the Virgin flight leave, Virgin on Sunday, British Airways on Monday, we're virtually down to zero. Most hotels are operating at 10% now. As Brian said, bars, restaurants, many have closed. We've just had the order issued that things are closed till the 31st of July. So this is a cash-in, cash-out business. There is no cash coming in as of Monday, Tuesday. We also have additional problems now with tour operators claiming force majeure on payments. So that's an additional problem for us because guests that have already been housed and fed, tour operators are now quoting that. And including, we've had to curtail holidays for people that came for longer have had to go quicker. So tour operators are also going to be asking to claim on insurance. So it's snowballing very quickly. Our immediate problem is staff because we'll have no money as of Tuesday. And utilities are going to be a problem as well for us. So it's a real challenge at the moment. As Brian said, you mentioned 2008. People with money still traveled in 2008. We were not as damaged as this. This is a much more severe and a longer. It looks like it's going to be a longer recovery rate from this. So it's not good in Tobago.
And what do you think about the reliefs announced by the government this week for business and for individuals?
No, we have to support the government. I think they're doing the right thing in terms of the contagion of the virus. Which has to be we have a duty of care to our families, our staff, and our customers. That has to come first. But the next thing that, on our minds is this financial fallout, and some of the measures that the government have stated are very welcome. But we really need to. We're hopefully meeting tomorrow to have further discussions because there are some immediate things that we need to be put in place.
Yeah, now Brian, you have payment on loan deferrals, and some other measures regarding credit cards and those, to what extent would those things mitigate the impact?
I think those are very welcome and very proactive measures that I think the banking sector and the government worked quickly on putting in place. You know, you saw the freeing up of liquidity through reduced reserve requirements and, of course, the lowering of the repo rate. And the banks, as of early as today, are rolling out reduction in prime lending rates and 6-month waivers in some cases. That's going to take away some of the extenuating circumstances and the fear factor that many employees face, which is, I'm not going to be able to make my commitments if I am unfortunately laid off. It goes deeper, of course, into the social programs and the support, and we're getting there, but the wider conversation is what happens when there are layoffs and there's an extended period of time when people don't have income. What about the owners, and I would say hospitality specifically, who still have rents to pay, utilities to pay, and still carry these costs in a zero-income environment? They want to share in the burden. They want to share in the recovery. They want to be open for business after COVID leaves our shores in a material way. What is the roadmap between now and then? And then several recommendations, I think, across most of the hotels and restaurants, even the tour operators, let's sit down with the the government. We've issued an invitation to the government to consider some of the survey results we've gotten from over 75 respondents, Trinidad and Tobago. We did get a good indication from the Minister of Tourism earlier this morning that they're open for this discussion. I think Chris mentioned tomorrow there's the first set of meetings in Tobago at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We want to make sure that that conversation is national. There are a lot of employees in the food and beverage sector in Trinidad that are going to be directly affected. They have already been affected for this week. They are not making any income every day. Signaling to restaurants and bars and hotels that you cannot serve guests in the food and beverage environment, and correctly so in terms of social distancing and mass gathering till July 31st requires a conversation.
Now, you can chime in on this as well, but I want to ask Chris, regarding the meetings with the minister and subsequent encounters you would have with state authorities, what would be on your wish list specifically?
Well, let me just add to one thing Brian said. Brian and I have been communicating a lot this week because of the situation. But one of the specific things here is we have all-inclusive guests here that have already paid for food and beverage packages. So things like that are going to have to be talked through because they're already annoyed because they're leaving early. So there are things we have to discuss. The wish list is immediately assistance for staff. We're going to have no money, we're going to have no customers for staff. So that has to be our immediate thing. Secondly, and Brian can go into this for me, the utilities, but especially electricity. Brian, I don't know if you just want to mention the thing we spoke about earlier with the electricity.
Yeah, so of course, in commercial rates for properties, there's going to be a sort of a minimum sort of requirement to pay a fixed amount. Those tend to be a high type of carrying cost besides what you use. And I think there needs to be some level of conversation on reducing, waiving, or even deferring some of those minimum reserve amounts in terms of TNTEC, etc. In the short run to get people comfortable around it. In terms of wish list, though, I think in the short term, we really want to get our employees and our workers some degree of safety and comfort in the short term that they can hold on for that period of time. They can take care of their families. They can look forward to a day and time that they can return safely to the hospitality sector. Many of them have spent 10, 20 years of their lives in this space, and it's extremely disruptive. It's a shared burden globally. There is an opportunity now to retool. I think one of the key recommendations to government is this kind of conversation that is so global and so national in nature. Let's look at a sector that can be regulated at the end of it. Why don't we do a listing now of who are our real operators? The public health ordinance earlier today spoke to anyone with a license. If we had a proper registry of hotels and restaurants in Trinidad that had license against who they are, a hotel special license, for instance, you would quickly know that I need to make an exception because there are actual guests in some of these properties still in Trinidad. In Tobago, I think Chris mentioned it, but Trinidad, there are guests in properties that can't leave. There are workers who've come here to do jobs, business travelers, workers who are staying on properties in Trinidad that are now stranded, one. Two, more importantly, can they eat and drink at the property, and can the proprietor not face the brunt of the law? What is the exception? And who is the state speaking to create that exception? That should come from a proper business registry that we should be working on now during the period, have very deep conversations with persons about their standards, their operating requirements, etc. But that's secondary to the current burning issue, staff, employees, and business continuity.
Chris?
Yes, exactly. Our immediate problem is going to be Monday morning when the hotels start to empty. And we have a real fear for that. There is no, in Tobago, and I'm sure in Trinidad, because of our problems in Tobago, there is no cash in the banks. We've been surviving hand to mouth, and that is where we are. We do not have spare cash. So we welcome the initiatives with the banks, but we just do not have the cash for staff layoffs, and there is going to be nothing for anybody to do. So that, and I agree with Brian, this is a time to think through everything that we do in this industry and really gear ourselves up. I heard, and I know Louis is probably waiting to speak, but we're going to have to look at the airlines. Some of the airlines that we deal with are going to go under. We have to look at what we're doing as we go forward and build relationships with possibly new airlines or existing airlines to make sure they know we're still here when everything comes back. This is the time. It looks like to the end of July at least. During this period, we have to sit down and work this out. Keep our relationship with tour operators and the airlines to make sure that we have something to come back to.
Now, even when if things shut down 100% and you're down to zero essentially, and you're left with the tourism plant, the hotels and other infrastructure, that's not neutral with respect to liability. That's not liability neutral. Mm-hmm. There are costs that will continue to be racked up. Mm-hmm. What is the thinking on that? Is that something that's going to be part of the wish list such that the state would have an understanding of these issues?
Yeah, I mean, there are decisions being taken up the islands in the Caribbean now about naturally mothballing the plants, skeleton staff in place, maintenance projects, and hold till the next winter season, which is November 2020. That may be ambitious to some persons because there's no guarantee that travelers will return at the numbers or at the levels in 9 months from now. There's no guarantee of that. However, their decision is that a closed plant that's maintained at a very minimal level is cheaper or a better alternative to running with no occupancy. Governments will have to figure out at what point can we keep or share with you, I would say, with the owners, some degree of, I said, business continuity. And not operating continuity, but rather, as you said, keeping the property alive, keeping the asset going. The banks have stepped up majorly in terms of if there's a debt component, you have at least up to 6 months in terms of waivers and deferrals. What about the utilities? I think Chris mentioned that. And then what about the minimum sort of cost factors to keep the plant? You can't completely shut it down. You need to have some level of maintenance going on regularly.
Okay, we're going to pick back up on that discussion when we come back from a break now. We're going to come back with Brian Frontin and Chris James, and we're discussing the impact of COVID-19 on the hospitality industry in Trinidad and Tobago. I'm Wesley Gibbings. Stay with us.
Even though school is closed, your child's SAA preparation does not stop. Let them learn math, language arts, creative writing and comprehension in the comfort and safety of your home. Using the JJ and Friends apps, workbooks and wall charts, all designed using the Ministry of Education's primary school curriculum and SAA 2019 to 2023 framework. Our program covers numbers, measurement, money, geometry, statistics, parts of speech, subject-verb agreement, conjunctions and joining sentences, active and passive voice, classical analysis, sentence analysis, direct and indirect speech, punctuation, spelling and vocabulary. Create the perfect learning environment in the safety of your home today. Plus, get a free Amazon Kindle Fire. Get your child fully prepared for SEA with the JJ and Friends SEA Success Series. Call now 800-READ.
Stupid mark. Shut your mouth. Who, Jimmy who? They wanna talk, but I ain't one for that gossip. Oh, nah. Ignorant. Stupid mark. Shut your mouth. Who, Jimmy who? They wanna talk, but I ain't one for that gossip. Oh. I thought I told y'all, it's Mr. October from now on. Just got cold out. Since winter schemes dropped, they like, oh Lord. Shout out to Noah and nobody else. Want me to stick their names in like I'm printing those labels back in Coca-Cola. You know them new name labels? I'm just playing, bruh. But why you talk so much? I'm just trying to get a fade in the cut. Stop. Feel like Wendy Williams in his barber shop. All this
Well, I think it means recognizing the worth a woman brings to this world, at home, in her relationships, at work. I, for myself, can tell you I'm actually the first in my family to achieve tertiary education. So I think that is a big achievement, and it all comes down to being not only the first in my family, but the first girl, the first to do so many things for others to look up to me as a role model. So to me, it's all about celebrating people like me who are the first to do so many other things. we've made so many strides and actually build on those who've set the foundation for us and to continue growing.
Welcome back to Response to COVID-19, and we're paying attention to the hospitality industry in Trinidad and Tobago. And we have Brian Frontin, who is CEO of the Trinidad Hotels, Restaurants and Tourism Association and the Trinidad and Tobago Hospitality Institute, the president of the Tobago Hotel and Tourism Association, Chris James, and joining us now on the phone is Chief Executive Officer of the Tobago Tourism Agency, Louis Lewis. Welcome, Mr. Lewis. Louis Lewis? Okay, he's going to come on in a short while. During the break, one of the people who's following us online asked about the numbers. Mm-hmm. How many people are we talking about when we talk about this industry?
So in the initial survey we did on the hotels alone, just between Trinidad and Tobago, we're well past 2,500 workers. When you add on restaurant employees as well, you get past 5,000. And you go down the value chain, tour operators, tour guides, and you see that this is a pretty significant sector in terms of the labor component. Hospitality is a people business, and obviously it's labor intensive. The only real key asset and resource in hospitality is the human resource. And it's really unfortunate that they're the first sort of casualties, or would be the first casualties to this, because the consumption is based on interaction. The consumption is based on gathering, on grouping, on spending time in close quarters and proximities, and that's all going away very quickly. And then there's the whole fear of even visiting and traveling in the short to medium term right now. I think that fear factor, or the removal of that fear factor, is going to be predicated on global confidence to fly and travel, and that's tied to, of course, medical solutions and vaccines in the short term.
Okay, now we have Louis Lewis on the line. Hi, Mr. Lewis.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening. Things look pretty dim. What's your reading of the situation? What's the outlook for the immediate future?
Well, I think this pandemic is really going to affect the tourism industry in a way in which we have not experienced in a very long time. As a matter of fact, I'd even suggest that we have not ever experienced. I think it is really going to affect people's willingness to travel on the first instance. And then secondly, it will affect the ability to travel in two perspectives. One, you would have noticed that a number of airlines would have decided not to fly. A number of countries have actually put embargoes on traffic. And on the second side is that it's going to affect incomes in the travel and tourism industry and the world generally, that even when people will be willing to travel, there might be an inability to travel. So it's a very delicate situation. It's somewhere that we have never been before, and it's something that we have to manage very carefully, because as Brian mentioned, it's about trying to instill confidence to get out of it, and the confidence will be predicated on the success of the health sector. So it's a very difficult and a dicey situation that we're in.
And well, Chris and Brian can join in terms of responding to this, but what would constitute managing the situation very carefully such that we don't face medium to long-term collapse?
I think the world is looking at every destination to see how it is managed, how the crisis is managed. And I think the confidence will be driven by the measures that are put in place to ensure that people feel comfortable that their lives will be safe, or at least they will not suffer any negative ailments. Our strategy in Tobago has been to share that strategy, to share that information, everything that we are doing from the health sector to ensure that this situation is contained. Once that is done, the travel trade will be looking at the respective destinations with a certain level of assurance that health issues are actually being managed. So there's little, if any, incidence or likelihood of them contracting that disease. The second issue is, how do you make a destination attractive after having gone through such an environment? And you have to focus on your core attractors. And it gives us an opportunity for us to recalibrate how we market, because that, I think, also will change or has changed forever. We have to be focusing on those key factors that make people want to leave their place of residence or their comfort to get to another place to experience a different life.
You know, Chris James, Louis Lewis just suggested that there is a need perhaps to recalibrate the industry and to refocus and perhaps even reposition it such that perhaps you might find yourself with a sector that does not look exactly as it does right now. What is your thinking on that particular issue? Chris?
Oh, sorry, I'm not hearing Louis, I'm afraid. Yes, I think this is the time. We have to look at everything. As Brian suggested earlier, this is a time to really understand this industry, because it's a very large employer. As Brian was hinting, it's not just the hotel workers or the restaurants or the bars. In Tobago, it's about 40% of employment, because it's all the suppliers, everybody that's involved. A lot of the things that we have in Tobago would not be available to us if we didn't have the tourism population, because of the size of our population. So it's an enormous thing. I don't know if you heard what I said earlier. One of the government's things they did was to offer to renovate existing hotels, and some hotels are interested in that. Those kind of things, we have to come back stronger and more focused after this.
Yeah, Brian, the recalibration and the reformulation of the industry.
Certainly. I'm seeing almost like little shoots of innovation happening, where I would say traditional freestanding restaurants are attempting to innovate into curbside. Now, one might say that that's a reaction because, you know, it's a zero income environment. But it's quite interesting that it's also pegged along the lines of using ride sharing as an opportunity. We're integrating some of the newer tech that has disrupted tourism over the last maybe 5 years, and seeing now in a crisis circumstance how we could repurpose our businesses to be more consumer oriented, to reduce the friction in delivering services, and even being more adaptive to embracing the technology that exists. I could see a future that is really not going to be reliant on main tour operator drivers from global spaces anymore, because it's all eroding and collapsing very quickly. In my mind, there's going to be several consolidations of the biggest players, I think, on the planet. The wholesale tour operators for sure. Then you also have the airlines that's going to be next. And then the next question after that is, which are the destinations and regions? Because we need to understand we're still pivoting within a Caribbean context, and people still look at us as part of a warm weather Caribbean experience. Whether we want to detach from it and say that we're singularly different, how the region has been performing and managing COVID-19 cases is going to impact whether travel is pointed to this region first in the recovery cycle. So it's a good opportunity to figure out what are the levers. I think Louis was correct in terms of if we can demonstrate that there have been practices put in place that have minimized long-term disruption in terms of citizens and health. It could present that sort of compelling case, but you know, the biggest concern is going to be the road between now and that future. Who are going to be the players that not thrive, because this is not the race of the fittest, it's actually a survival situation, and we need to be cautious that we are not going to have too much erosion of traditional long-standing businesses that may have been independently curating their own natural Trinidad and Tobago feel, and it just disappears and dries up, and then it's replaced with something else. We need to spare a thought for authenticity.
Yeah. Now, Chris, are you seeing, Brian has painted a scene there where globally there will tend to be some consolidations, a rationalization of businesses when it comes to the airlines, when it comes to the travel industry generally. Domestically, how do you see the consolidations and the rationalizing and the refocusing taking place?
It's a challenge, and it's a challenge that we have to take hold of, because Brian didn't mention the peer-to-peer, the Airbnb and things. There are certain things that have changed already before this that we have to focus on, because without bringing all of those properties also into our net of standardization and taxation, then we are going to have a challenge going forward. And I agree, Brian is correct. Internationally, you're hearing the airlines are saying that they're not going to survive this. I won't call names, but there are airlines that have already stated this. So we are going to have to build new relationships. I also agree that because of the peer-to-peer move, the Airbnb kind of movement, we have a lot more travelers that are not using traditional tour operators. So we have to really sit down, analyze what we have. We have to improve the ease of doing business in Trinidad and Tobago. We have to make it easier to actually get the investment, get the businesses going, because this is, as I say, an enormous employer and could really be the first diversification away from oil and gas as we move forward.
Great. Thank you very much for that. We're going to go to a break now. So it looks as if what we're talking about is a total macroeconomic reformulation of how we're doing business in Trinidad and Tobago. It's not just a matter of the sector. We're going to go to a break now and we'll be right back.
The winning numbers in the National Lottery online draws for Thursday, 19th March 2020 at 10:30 a.m. Playway, the number 36 Donkey, Mega and Mega Ultra Bowl Fold. Pick 2, the numbers 12 and 33 in that order, Mega Bowl Fold. Pick 4, the numbers 2, 5, 6 and 6 in that order. At 1 p.m., Playway, the number 30 House Cat, Mega Extreme Bowl Fold. Pick 2, the numbers 19 and 18 in that order. Pick 4, the numbers 7, 6, 4 and 6 in that order. At 4 p.m., Playway, the number 27 Little Snake, Mega Bowl Fold. Pick 2, the numbers 2 and 33 in that order, Mega Bowl Fold. Pick 4, the numbers 5, 3, 7 and 0 in that order. And at 7 p.m., Playway, the number 13 Crapple. Pick 2, the numbers 18 and 27 in that order, Mega Bowl Fold. Pick 4, the numbers 9, 7, 8 and 0 in that order. Cashpot, the numbers 12, 2, 15, 5 and 1 in any order, and the multiplier is 3.
Where is the test for the coronavirus COVID-19 taken for confirmation?
The medical or health officer will have your sample taken to the Caribbean Public Health Agency, CARFA, in Port of Spain, where doctors will first test for coronavirus.
This public service announcement was brought to you by TTT Limited Media Network.
Hi, empowering women. A message to all mothers, grandmothers, sisters, aunts. Without us women, you can't make it. Women are the backbone of this nation, of this generation. And to all women, 2 thumbs up.
My household didn't have television, but my grandmother had a television. And all she could have seen was TTT. There was something called Party Flavor. It's the first time I saw rap, reggae, and dancehall videos in my life.
That make us dream in a way, you know? It make us dream, and it didn't seem like the world was so far outside of ourselves. They look like us, they sound like us. And so, yeah, we feel like we can achieve. Well, I'm Mohammed.
And I'm Lou.
And we are Freetown. And we believe that our stories start right here on TTT.
Protect yourself from COVID-19 novel coronavirus. Wash your hands frequently with soap and water or use an alcohol-based hand sanitizer. Healthy me, healthy you, healthy Trinidad and Tobago. A message from the Ministry of Health.
Welcome back to Response to COVID-19. I am Wesley Gibbings, and the focus this evening is the hospitality and tourism sector. But the background to all of this, the backdrop is the COVID-19 pandemic. And today, the Secretary of Health, Wellness and Family Development at the Tobago House of Assembly, Tracy Davidson Celestin, said the island is ready for the pandemic. Councillor Davidson Celestin gave an update on the island's readiness during a special post-executive media briefing this morning.
We now have 32 spaces on hand for treating with COVID persons who are positive but well. With respect to the positive and ill cases, if the person is positive and ill, that individual will also be taken into isolation at the Scarborough General Hospital and will be stabilized for 24 to 48 hours. And like everything else, we have facilities in Tobago, but if it is necessary, that person will be transported to Trinidad where they can seek further care. At this current time, the hospital, as we have it, can isolate 11 patients at any one time. And if persons require intensive care, there is an identified area at the hospital to stabilize those patients.
Well, Louis Lewis, I suppose all of Tobago paid very close attention to those pronouncements this morning, and what generally has been the feedback to the ability of the island to cope with the pandemic so far, and what has been the feedback to these pronouncements by the THA? Mr. Lewis? Mr. Lewis? Oh, yes. Okay. We're going to come back to him. Sure. Yeah, but this is painting the reality. That's the reality check there.
Yeah.
So that's what we're dealing with. And basically the industry appears to be quite prepared to play its part in ensuring that people of Trinidad and Tobago stay safe.
Correct.
But the price is a very heavy price to pay.
Correct. And as I said, very quickly after the change in dynamics of Sunday into Monday, we went straight to the industry and said, tell us quickly, how is this going to impact you? Collected those results and have issued them last evening to the Office of the Prime Minister, the Minister of Tourism, the Minister of Trade, given their roles on the Economic and Finance Committees and those considerations that are now being pulled out. And I do spare a thought for how rapid the dynamics are changing. They are putting their efforts into the safety and security, the health and safety of our citizens, but we need to be talking lockstep and quickly to get the real result that balances the burden of this experience. It's quite negative experience. So that we all come out at the end of it with a Trinidad and Tobago that is poised for growth, poised for recovery, but there's a price, and the price has to be discussed. The manner in which we treat our citizens and our workers remain paramount in our minds, because that's really what's going to carry us through to the recovery cycle, how well they are buffered during this period and how well the business and community themselves can last for that period of time.
And as you have said, some fine-tuning of the arrangements in place right now would need to be put in place, because as you said, there are people who will continue to occupy hotel space and will need to be fed, and fed and watered.
Some of the calls I got earlier is that, am I going to be charged or fined if I open my restaurant to my guests staying in Ireland in Trinidad and Tobago right now? It's a real concern. So we need to have that discussion quickly with the relevant ministries and the relevant ministers to say, let's create the exceptions quickly. If a hotel has a special hotel license, what concessions are given to them while they see out their guests? There is a future 2 weeks from now with 0 guests. We're sure about that part as people continue to depart. But of course, it's the last until July 31st that's concerning.
Okay, Louis Lewis, I apologize. We lost you for a short while there. But we are on the topic now of recalibrating and fine-tuning some of the measures that the government has put in place to address the COVID-19 crisis and with its impact on the hotel and tourism sector. What kind of fine-tuning would you propose?
Well, I think we have to take the opportunity of utilizing the shadow of this crisis to increase our level of competitiveness. Because as we emerge, even notwithstanding the fact that tourism is very competitive, we are going to see that level of competitiveness intensify as countries around the world vie for a single pool of the traveling public. And it is going to come back incrementally, so that you will see a lot of advertisements and featuring authentic experiences. I would imagine the strategy would focus on things like that surround health and wellness and and enhancing the human experience. So we have to find ways in which we can showcase those assets, and we have to ramp up our product quality. And it starts from the accommodation side, because a person deciding to take a vacation looks, to some extent, to a large extent, focuses on where they are going to stay. And you have this international referee called TripAdvisor that adjudicates over quality. So the program that the government has announced that looks at the accommodation upgrade is something that we have to take very serious. The other aspect, as it relates to service delivery, how do we enhance the sites and attractions to make a compelling story that sticks to the visitor, that makes them want to travel? How do we showcase those unique experiences that are not just physical structured assets, but speak to a unique experience? How does someone come to a place like Tobago with that exquisite landscape that you can go into a waterfall and have an experience that is far different from anywhere else in the world? But we have to make those things amenable to a new, different type of traveler, a traveler who now will take more control over the itinerary, who wants to have the certainty of security, who wants to have that certainty that we can get back to our place of residence if anything should go wrong. And therefore, the market now has to cater and package those things. So you will see a greater connectivity between the airline and the service providers. You will see an enhanced quality of product, and we have to find new ways to reach that visitor, which would be a smaller number.
Yeah, thank you very much, Louis Lewis, CEO of the Tobago Tourism Agency. Brian, as we wrap now, the way forward, it looks as if it's going to be a different world altogether.
Yeah, it's going to be the global tourism industry will operate differently 12 months from today. I mean, we're not going to be seeing some of the major players in the same constitution that they were before. How people decide to travel will be affected, but I see a lot of digitization of the processes around travel and interaction that's going to be there to help, because social distancing that's going to set in is going to lead people to spend a lot more time interacting through digital channels. It may linger and may change how we interact in hospitality and tourism. We're looking forward to conversations on how we can build that bridge between now and then, and open to providing all the feedback and suggestions we can.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
But we've come to the end of our program for this evening. I'd like to thank our guests, Brian Frontin of the Trinidad Hotels, Restaurants and Tourism Association, Chris James, President of the Tobago Hotels Association, and Louis Lewis, CEO of the Tobago Tourism Agency. And before we go, let me remind you, in case you missed it, we'll be bringing you a rebroadcast of today's post-cabinet media briefing starting at 10 p.m. Thank you for joining us. I'm Wesley Gibbings. Good night and stay safe.